Well, you know, when the drinker asked me to come on this stream, we were talking specifically about The Last of Us, and The Last of Us has become, this last episode has become so divisive. And
You could say that, yeah.
Mahler and Drinker, you both liked the episode, so I thought it was an interesting topic to discuss.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Yeah,
Dude, I think on Real BBC, that's how I introduced my perspective. Was I'm friends with so many people across social media. I saw it split like right down the middle. You never know. Next person's like liked it but hated this, or loved it, or I absolutely hated it. I was just like, whoa, this is creating like every response you could get, pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, it's I've talked about it quite a bit on my channel, and I've said, like, as an episode in isolation, I thought it was really good. I thought it told a good story. I thought it had good pacing. I thought it had good emotional value. But there's a bigger aspect to it that I thought was counterproductive to the overall story. But yeah, it is very divided. I mean, on my video, I have never been ratioed on YouTube. Fingers crossed. This one came close, but it has. But while I don't have a negative, and it's nearly negative, but it has more comments than likes. It's got like 7,000 comments on my video. It is
it's also
crazy how divisive this episode is. Go ahead, Robert.
But they used material that was definitely inherent in the first Last of Us game. You know, it was there, and they extrapolated upon it. And I think that Craig Mazin, coming off of Chernobyl, which is one of the great modern miniseries that we really
love that show.
It was incredibly well done, and to see the quality of writing. I mean, you know, we as fans were always complaining about how adaptations are not done well, but the fact that Neil Druckmann teamed up with Craig Mazin to do this is what I'd like to see more of in terms of having IPs translated from one medium to another. And while I understand, take The Last of Us 2 out of it, you know, the fact that they brought, I mean, Neil co-wrote the first Last of Us game, and the fact that HBO allowed them to team up to do this, and that Mazin, it's been interesting because if you look at it, Craig Mazin co-wrote the first episode and directed it, and then Druckmann directed the second episode, and then Mazin wrote this episode, and they brought in a third director. But in terms of getting this kind of handling of an IP, you've got to look at it as a win, I think.
I think so. Yeah, I mean, I think we were all very impressed, like, from that technical aspect of capturing the look and feel of the games, giving that mature, somber tone that you expected from the games. I think that aspect of it they really nailed. And I think probably episode 3 was an example of, hey, you know, there's ways you can deviate from the narrative of the games and still produce a good end product. You know, something that's emotionally satisfying and tells a really good story. You know, they, like you say, they extrapolated from it a little bit, and you know, it meant changing things around a little bit so that certain characters weren't around anymore when Joel and Ellie show up. But I think ultimately you got a pretty satisfying story out of that episode. So yeah, I very much came down on the side of really enjoying it. I think that was the most like emotionally invested I was in the show out of all 3 episodes so far. More so even than episode 1, which really surprised me. But I think it comes down to that combination of the writing, the acting's really good.
I was more emotionally invested in the first episode just because anytime there's a father-daughter dynamic, you know, obviously connects with me. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, if all of Hollywood would at least put some level of care into their agenda-driven stories like this one did, I think it'd be a much better level of content out there. This was just an outlier for a lot of the things I've seen, but it was still good.
Something I've seen people discuss is like what do they do in total? It's like they do a lot of experience stuff, right? Like farming the respective foods or planting, painting, eating, drinking, music, talking about like making the place look a particular way. What they're not doing is talking about in this bizarre era way, like talking about like oppression or pride or anything. It's just two humans who have a relationship, which I think helped it go over a lot better with a lot of people compared to a lot of stuff that can come out these days, where it's like a lot of people try to go as far as saying representation, blah, blah, but like preaching versus presenting, for lack of a better term.
I think that's a good way of looking at it. Yeah. Because they essentially live outside a world where any of those things are even concerns now. When they're in isolation like that.
And it was interesting how they tried. Oh, sorry.
Just real quick, I was going to say, if they did talk about how, like, man, sucks being gay in a zombie apocalypse, it would be like, what?
Yeah.
But they don't go anywhere near stuff like that.
Well, the fact that these two individuals were trying to preserve and hold on to civilization. They had created this oasis of civilization, and it really served to graphically show what is being lost. I mean, the fact that it looked like Mayberry RFD there, where these bucolic suburban homes that were beautiful, and when the two of those gentlemen are gone, that's like the last vestiges of civilization.
Yeah,
that's the end. And when I saw that last shot looking out that window, the episode began with Nick Offerman's character, before he found Frank, looking at the world in black and white through his monitors in a basement.
Yeah.
And it left off with, at the end of his life, the window was open into the colors of the community that they had created. That was it. That was the end of civilization. So I think that it really served not just to tell a story of those two characters, and it gave you an overall feeling of what has been lost for all of humanity.
Yeah, I think that captures that. I guess that pathos of, like you say, the end of the civilized person. The end of that old way of thinking.
Yeah.
That you can still have an element of trust in other people. You can still cling to the old ways of sitting down to have a civilized dinner and all that stuff. That's it, gone now, and this world that they've lost isn't coming back.
And to see the change in Bill. I mean, Bill went from a guy living in his basement being paranoid to a person that learned how to live. And he said, my purpose was to save someone else. And that was actually in the face of apocalypse. That was kind of an uplifting message.
It's how it reflects on Joel and Ellie, right? His final message to him is like, I see a lot of myself in you. I respect you. He says, like, I don't like you, but obviously he did. And he was like, we protect the ones we love. I protected him. You're going to protect Tess. I thought, that hits fucking hard, doesn't it? Because Joel's just going to think he failed Tess, sort of thing. Failed Sarah, and so he cannot fail Ellie. And I think that's going to set up a lot going forward, probably.
Well, I mean, what I'm hoping this does for Joel is that it sets up him with an actual purpose now, and something that he actually approaches with real determination, because it feels like he's been kind of just drifting on the tides of wherever the story's taken him so far. And yeah, he needs to take charge a little bit now.
Well, unfortunately, he has a purpose, and they've confirmed that it's all roads are leading to that purpose in season 2.
I know.
Apparently. So,
well, I guess this is the thing that we talk about, isn't it? It's like we want it to stick to the games until we don't, and then we want it to deviate wildly from the games because we know what's coming.
Much prefer it deviate, yeah.
I'm really hoping that they stay true to the story, because it will be very good for my channel. Because the Last of Us Part 2,
it'll just be like a crazy deja vu. We'll be going through the whole era again.
Yes,
It's running through all the arguments again. Which have to remind everybody of how much of a horrible decision it was in the second game.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting though whether Neil Druckmann takes a different approach and recognizes that game was really divisive. Maybe there's another way I can accomplish the same aim, but do it in, I don't know, a more satisfying way for the audience. I don't think he will, but
I'll take full advantage of it if he switches it too, because then I'll be like, we were right all along. The fans were right, and he changed it. So I mean, win-win for me. So.
If we can't lose because we'll get Fat Geralt if they adapt it faithfully.
That's true. That's truly a misunderstood hero.
His own spin-off show. Come on.
Yeah, but no, it is interesting, I guess, the reactions to this episode. But then, we're only a third of the way through the season now, so it does make me wonder. Yeah. Is it going to deviate more in other places, or is it going to get back on track? We're obviously going to find out on Monday night, I guess. But
because I'm with you on Joel and Ellie's relationship. I prefer it in the game so far. Out of the 3 episodes we've had, I don't think this one is as strong. And part of what I'm hoping they'll do is that when something gets very serious, say for example when they're in the car and there's that trap that's set for them in the game, and Joel sees it coming a mile away, and it's to do with the history that he's had. He's probably laid traps like that for people in his life. I want that to come up. I'd like it to be that the second they're in the kind of trouble with bandits type people that are attacking them, Ellie has no say anymore. She does everything he says to a T immediately. There's no more like banter and moments like that. That's the kind of stuff I'd like to see, and then I want it to be broken down over time, like the game did. It'd be cool if the show does it as well.
I think, yeah, because they had the exact same conversation in the show at the end of episode 3 as they had in the game, where it's like, I'm going to get you to this destination, but you have to do exactly as I say. It just, I don't know, it didn't get delivered with the same conviction that it did in the game, and I wonder if this version of Ellie is going to be less cooperative, I guess, or this version of Joel is going to be a bit less assertive, because they've already started to deviate from him, the original, in terms of his personality and stuff. He seems like a much more damaged man, a less stable man than he was in the games, and
he's a little bit warmer too. Like he's more willing to be stepped on, so to speak, a little bit in conversation.
I think so, yeah. Like the best I could liken it to is like when they're talking to each other, I kind of feel like Ellie's the one who dictates the tone and the sort of pacing of the conversation. She speaks when she's ready, and she asks him questions, and he answers them, and it's like it very much feels like she's in charge of the conversation. Whereas like I'd like to see a bit more of a back and forth dynamic.
Yeah,
he's not the straight up alpha male from the game. He's just not. He's definitely a lot more passive, and which bothers me and a lot of people, I'm sure. But I think overall, regardless of my personal opinion on how I feel that the series is going, I think that it's being very well received across the board up to this point. I think 3 was very divided, but episode 1 and 2, I personally don't like. I can look at things in 2 different ways. I can look at it and say, okay, this is a really well-made episode. I just don't like it, or vice versa. But I don't feel emotionally invested in any of this. Now, maybe it's just because of my history with Naughty Dog and how much I don't like them. I don't feel that this series is going to go in a good direction. So while I can admit that these things are good, I still think that it's going to end up in a really bad place when it's all said and done. And that's not even talking about season 2. I'm just thinking towards the end of season 1. I just don't have confidence in them. And I think the actress that plays Ellie is pretty terrible.
It was something I picked up on with the actress, and I don't know whether it's like the script's telling her that she has to act this way. But what I get is just a pretty limited range, where it kind of feels like she can do angry and defiant, and she can do like joking around, like haha, it's all very funny and I'm making fun of you, but like there's not really any depth to that. Like the Ellie from the games had real moments of trauma and sadness at the things she was witnessing, because she was kind of venturing out into the world for the first time, and so she had a kind of innocence to her as well.
Vulnerability as well.
Yeah, which I think is really important to make a compelling character. If you don't have that balance, then you just get someone who's a bit walled off and inaccessible for the audience, and it kind of feels like that's what they've got so far. And like I say, we're 3 episodes in, and we're still not really getting let into who Ellie is, and I just wonder how long they're going to take to do that, and whether they might lose their opportunity.
4 out of 9 is what we're on next, isn't it? It's like might want to speed it up now, guys. We can't be dilly dallying.
Yeah, I feel like the actress plays Ellie as how she knows that Ellie will dominate the story moving forward. Like she treats it with some level of overconfidence and over sarcasm at times, and it's like you're treating the character like the character's journey already, instead of the character going on the journey. If that makes sense. Does that make sense?
I think I can see that. Like she's almost like post arc Ellie. She's not pre arc Ellie.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think they told her specific.
She has the answers to the test already, and she's showing you.
I think they told her specifically not to play the game.
Mm-hmm.
They told her to stay away from that, which is
such nonsense.
It just seems like a strange choice.
Didn't she watch a playthrough though? That's what she said.
I mean, she did, but she wasn't supposed to.
It was against. It's almost like how James Gunn told the people on some of his projects not to do any research on some of the comments. It makes no sense
in the history
whatsoever.
of everything. When has that ever damaged a performance though?
I know.
Provably speaking, has anyone ever said, "I wish I hadn't read the bloody source. I would have been way better"? Like,
yeah.
But I also think that there's a realism they're bringing into this, in the sense that if you grew up in that zone, and you lived and you were born into a post-fungal apocalypse environment, you would certainly have to have a hard edge surviving in that world. It would be difficult to be a sweet person the way Ellie comes off in the game, at least at first.
I think in the game, like, she's not. I didn't take her as being like kind of, all sweetness and light and naive. It's more like she puts up this front of being, aggressive and defiant, but beneath it, she kind of hasn't seen much of the world. And although she's lived in this, crappy quarantine zone for her whole life, as tough as life is there, it's still a relatively sheltered life comparatively to other people. And I always took her arc as being like, well, once she gets outside those walls, she gets to see a bit of the world. She gets to experience, the real danger of like other humans and so on. And learns to stand on her own 2 feet because of the things that Joel teaches her. And like at times she's forced to stand up and defend him because he's injured and, he needs her help. That was her arc. It was learning self-reliance and learning self-confidence. And not quite losing that edge of compassion that she had, and teaching that to Joel. Like, I always took it as like a kind of balancing out of each other's personalities. Like, she teaches him to be a bit more compassionate and soften up in some ways, and he teaches her to toughen up in other ways, and they level out with each other.
Yeah, and I feel like in the game at this point, at least, there was more evidence that she was respecting what Joel represented, which was he's basically my bodyguard, and that as much as I can toy around with him a little bit, what he says goes. Which is why I'm like curious to see what'll happen now that he's set that rule in episode 3. I hope we can see sort of the results of that. Or are we going to jump ahead now? Because this is the thing. I worry about the timeline. We got to do the cannibals, obviously the 2 guys they meet up with, and the bandits portion, obviously Tommy, which I think they're going to have a bigger focus on Tommy in this show, possibly. So don't know how everything's going to spread out, but we'll see, I suppose.
Yeah.
It's certainly beautifully made.
Yeah. Well, I absolutely love the world building through the production. And if they have to have green screens going, because I know they didn't film in a ruined city. So some of those shots, I'm like, damn, dude, they look great. Like, and there's nothing but praise for a lot of the sets. You can tell it takes insane work, and sometimes they'll film in the set for like a 3-minute scene, and then we never see it again. It's like, that's excellent. Good job, guys.
The lobby of the hotel too, with the water and the
yeah. Mm-hmm. I love as well, like the bits that flesh out the backstory to this. Where you get like little snippets from during the outbreak, how it took hold, what people tried to do to stop it, the military getting involved, all that stuff. Like, it fleshes out things that you didn't necessarily see in the games, and yeah, I really enjoy that stuff. I love seeing how it went down.